super excited for our next guest here because he's super smart. And also, it is a topic we haven't even touched yet because I have been just celebrating our early voting surge. And I want you guys to keep emailing them, freedom@charliekirk.com. Our next guest is Ryan James Girdusky, founder of the 1776 Project PAC, and also at natpop.substack.com. Ryan, welcome back to the program. Ryan, we have not even touched on the Bret Baier Kamala Harris interview. I would believe it was closest to the Hindenburg yesterday. Walk us through your analysis of it, and I want to play some pieces of tape. But first, Ryan, your thoughts on that interview that happened yesterday.
Well, I think that if you're going to do a media strategy and change your media strategy to reach out to voters you have not really spoken to, which is what Kamala Harris is doing, you have to ask yourself, who was she trying to talk to, right? Who was the goal of that interview? Was it Republicans who were open to voting for her, or was it to replay her hottest clips for the Morning Joe the next day? I think the intention was for moderate Republicans, but I think in the end, she kind of surrendered to just going back to the Morning Joe crowd. Her answer on immigration was horrendous. She wouldn't let Bret Baier actually bring up the fact correctly as he tried to do. She interrupted him that she offered amnesties, not an actual solution to the border crisis. She did not, she was conflating two different immigration bills, neither which one would have actually solved the border crisis. Her answer on Biden's age and what she knew with what is probably one of the greatest cover-ups ever in American history, that the president had severe mental decline. She wouldn't answer that. And then when she was asked about the transgender surgeries for illegal immigrants, she said, "I'll follow the law," which is not an answer because you helped create the law. So she had a few good moments for Democrats as far as attacking Trump goes, things that were effective, one-liners that they would like. But as far as reaching out to Republicans who may not like Trump but care about the issues quite a bit, I think she totally bombed.
I completely agree. And just to be clear, Bret Baier had a really, first of all, I just want to be fair. I thought Bret Baier did well. I think objectively did well. I wish that Bret Baier would have at least allowed the non-answer on the immigration question to marinate a little bit more, because that was actually the best part of, you know what I mean? He said, how many illegals are in this country because of you? And I think that would have been totally fair for him to just be with a dog with a bone. Be like, well, Vice President, can you take a guess of how many people are illegally in the country? I think that was a great question that could have been better executed. All right, so let's play some of this tape here just to kind of set the table here. Let's go to cut 88. You and I both know what I'm talking about. Bret Baier with a great follow-up. Play cut 88.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
but
people
you're the
have
lever
become.
Of power.
But listen.
So Ryan, first of all, I thought Bret's answer there was great. And this is this condescending elitist. Well, you and I both know what I'm talking about. And Bret was like, well, actually, I don't. Like, don't do that. Like, what is this? It's also this pathological, insane effort to make it seem as if Trump is the incumbent while she's running the country. Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's very hard to run as the change candidate when you are the incumbent vice president. I think, and she's using her gender and race to be the change factors, not really the policies, because she kept on saying, my administration will be different than Biden's. And Bret said, well, how? And then she couldn't give an answer to how it would be different than Biden's. I thought that was great. I do think Bret should have let her talk a little longer before trying to interrupt her, but she did show up late to the interview, and Bret said that her staff was cutting it off as quickly as possible, because this is, I think, the very first time there was a genuinely, not hostile interview, but adversarial interview she's faced in any real, I mean, maybe she had one on 60 Minutes, but that was really the only other adversarial interview she ever did as running for president. And I think that she completely squandered the moment where she could have sat there and said something like, we got it wrong in the past, but I'm a new generation. But she didn't want to sit there and disrespect Joe Biden. And at the same time, she couldn't bash Barack Obama because it was 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden. So 12 of the 16 were one party. It was your party. And you can't really bash the two men that were involved in that time period. So you have to go back to Trump running for office. I don't know. What does it matter that he was running for office in 2015? He wasn't in charge of anything besides the Trump, company.
What they're getting at, and this is, let me make sense of this, is that Kamala Harris her team has data that the American people are fatigued with the current state of politics. And so they're misreading that data, and they think that their strategy can be like, oh, you're fatigued because of Trump, and therefore he's kind of this like shadow and decade-long incumbent that we need to turn the page on. And that's such a flawed political. No, but that's what it is, though. I'm telling you, that's what David Plouffe has authored here. Is that the data? Again, the analysis is wrong, but the data is itself. Like, yes, Americans are fatigued with politics. Americans are kind of tired of these cycles, and they want it to be over with. So the trick they've done is like, okay, Trump is this decade-long incumbent. Even though when he's not in power, he's still ruining our politics, and like everything will be great once we remove him. And it is such a deeply flawed and risky political strategy to try and convince the American body politic that, oh, I'm actually not in charge when I'm in charge, so still give me more power. This is what you were just mentioning, play cut 87.
What? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
One sec, Ryan. One sec. Play cut 87.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions.
Okay, Ryan, and that's actually not the cut I wanted, but it still works. Your reaction, Ryan, I know you got a lot to say.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, with what you're saying before about they're tired of politics, they are tired of the media's coverage of politics. They are tired of the way that the media has made Trump the center of everyone's life. It is not healthy for a presidential candidate to be the center of your life where you feel like every day may be the end of the world because the media is telling you it could be the end of the world. On the immigration thing, what she doesn't want to admit, and she does something very, very, very important. She sits there and says border crossings are down from their height, which they are. And then she says we needed a congressional action, which is untrue. They had all the laws on the books that they needed. They only started using some of them, and very, very few, rather recently, in order to sit there and bring numbers down before the election. Her entire thing that it's an act of Congress. Congress gave the president almost every law he needs back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is a trope that she's using to sit there and say it's not my fault, push the buck to somebody else, but also we're having good results. It's not, you can't have both ways.
Yeah, and can you speak to this though? Again, we mentioned it briefly, but this kind of rather insulting idea that Trump is still running the country for 10 years, that Trump is the deep state. That Trump's actually in charge. That's basically their argument, that Trump is the deep state, that even though they have all the power and control of the agencies, Trump has been this like decade-long pseudo-dictator of the country.
Right. Somehow Donald Trump is able to end bills from being passing. Donald Trump is able to sit there one Truth Social post at a time from stopping Congress from reacting and doing that. That is, if that were true, when Donald Trump was president, he would have gotten his, all the money for the wall on day one. They have this dual vision of Donald Trump, that he is a dementia-ridden, low IQ individual and a secret mastermind who's able to plot destructions from the back of his phone when he's, going to McDonald's. This is like the two separate worlds that Donald Trump lives in their head, simultaneously, and they can't kind of concretely get which one it is. She calls him, like in the interview, she calls him, I think, a diminished man, or somebody with, signs of decline or something to that effect. And at the same time, he is secretly operating the country. To any thinking person, you sit there and say, that doesn't make any sense. Which one is it? You are either, an evil genius, or you are a bumbling fool who happens to be the luckiest man in America. But only to a liberal mind could someone like Kamala Harris be a genius and Joe Biden be completely healthy, as Morning Joe said he was. And Donald Trump's an idiot, and so is Elon Musk. And they're just lucky throughout their entire life. It doesn't make any sense when you sit there and you think about it.
It's just dumb luck that we get satellites into orbit. It's just a roll of the dice. I
Yes,
hate when
absolutely.
that happens. When just random people just like, wow, that rocket happened to deliver a package to an international space station.
My favorite excuse that liberals will say is, well, somebody else would have invented it eventually. There are dozens of people like in Ethiopia waiting to invent these things, and they're just, yes, it is deranged. It's a deranged way of thinking.